to ensure that they are in good financial standing, so that they cannot be making significant losses, etc. And we also ensure that they comply with regulations and rules. Very important for us to be able to manage the system as a whole. Now, this diagram, though intuitive, is quite important, because if any of these pillars shift at any point in time, we have a problem. Our macroeconomy can actually collapse. So it's vital that we have both pillars standing upright at the same time. It makes no sense one pillar shifting, the other pillar will not be able to support overall macroeconomic stability. So we require both pillars to be very strong if our economy is to remain strong. And financial instability can create a lot of problems. It's caused by many different things. It's caused by macroeconomic shocks, bubbles. You've seen the financial crisis outside. That can bring an economy down very quickly. In fact, the US economy, as you know, was on the verge of near collapse once their financial system started to collapse. It can come about because of weak balance sheets in financial institutions. A financial institution may have a very, maybe running losses for a significant amount of time, and that can create instability. It may be selling poor assets. It may be distributing poor products. That creates a problem. It may be overexposed to a particular sector in the economy. If that sector collapses, we can also have a problem. And of course, you may have also other weaknesses in the system. So it is vital that we pay attention to this. And of course, the consequences we all know. Once instability arises, we will have problems with our national output. Output will fall. The government may have to find a lot of money to support the system. So we'll have increased fiscal expenditure, and the government is likely to run significant deficits. Our balance of payments can get into problems. So we may not be able to actually have sufficient resources to pay for some of the imports that we want. And our exchange rate then becomes very volatile and problematic. And therefore, a key part of what we have been trying to do over the last few years is to maintain financial sector stability. And this involves many things. This involves strengthening our legislative framework. So a number of new laws are coming to try to strengthen how banks and other financial institutions operate, improving our regulation and supervision, that is going into the banks more frequently, looking at their books more frequently, looking much more copiously at their transactions, etc., and what they do, upgrading our financial infrastructure, providing a proper payment system, introducing new technology in the way that we operate in our payment system so that we don't have difficulties, stress testing our banks, trying to see how they react to various shocks, whether their balance sheets can survive different types of shocks. If oil prices collapse, will their balance sheet survive? So we've been doing this fairly recently, putting together a crisis management plan, providing much more information on the financial system to the public so that the public understands what is taking place with our financial system. And of course, finally, the key thing that the bank has been promoting is financial literacy, ensuring that the public is educated about these things. They understand how the economy works, and they understand what they need to do. This is just a list of some of the legislation that you have to pay some attention to. And I think as scholars, you need to ensure that you become familiar with some of these. The act that governs the banks and deposit institutions is really the Financial Institutions Act 2008. Get a copy of it and try to understand it. The central bank has its own act which governs how the central bank has to operate. And there are a number of new pieces of legislation that are coming. There's a new Insurance Act which will regulate and substantially change how insurance companies operate in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is currently being drafted. A draft already exists, and it is now at the parliamentary, now at the CPC stage. We have a new Securities Industries Act which will govern how activity takes place in the security market, how bonds are traded, how stocks operate, etc. And that will dictate how these players behave. And of course, we have new acts coming for the credit union and for pensions. I just wanted to say a couple things on the Financial Institutions Act, because I think these powers, or these new powers, are quite important, right? So financial institutions would be required to broaden and improve the quality of information that they actually provide to the public, right? And these are new features that the Act will require. We also have now the authority to share information with other regulators, so that a financial institution can't decide it wants to operate one way in Barbados and then operate one way in Trinidad. The regulators can sit and talk, and if it's a rogue financial institution, the regulators can actually take the required decision. The powers of the regulator have been strengthened significantly, and fines have been increased for financial institutions. So these are some of the key pieces of information that you need to be aware of in terms of the changes to the FIA. The financial infrastructure itself, that is, all of this is happening in the financial system, but banks have computer-based systems, they have trading platforms in which all of this exchange of information is taking place, and we have been, over time, improving this. So we have introduced a number of computer-based systems. One of the most important ones is, of course, the RTGS. So very large transactions, over $500,000, etc. These go through a particular system so that the information on these transactions is tracked at all stages, so that no trades are left open, so that there's very little exposure of someone not being able to pay or meet a particular check in the system. The government security system, government bonds are now traded online. There is an online auction system for bonds. So if you wanted, for instance, to purchase a government bond, you can, as an individual, there are mechanisms online which allow you to actually purchase bonds for investment purposes. Rates are not as great as some years ago, but I think as national scholars, it's a good idea to take a little bit of some of the money that you have and put it into government securities. You know, over time, as rates improve, etc., you earn some additional income. Rates are now very, very low; they're under 1%. But many years ago, when I was a young person like you, to go off to study in London, I also had invested a lot in bonds when rates were much higher, 7, 8, 9, 10%. And therefore, if you took $100,000, you put it into bonds. I didn't have all of that. I had to beg, borrow from various players. You could make some money, and if you roll these over, normally you have 3-month, 6-month bills, etc. You can actually make some money. So it's very important that you also learn to look at various avenues for making money. So a lot has happened, and another important office that we have created is the Financial Services Ombudsman Office, which is part of the infrastructure. If you have a difficulty with a commercial bank on some particular transaction and you're not satisfied with how that institution has dealt with you, you can always come into the Ombudsman and discuss the matter. Right? So all of these are upgrades in the infrastructure to allow financial business to be conducted more effectively. Coming to the end, just a few more slides. And perhaps the last slide at the end here is our financial system is very, very strong, and you have a very strong capital base. Regulatory capital to risk-weighted assets, I want you to keep your eye on this term, is about 24%. The norm in the world generally is about 8%. So we have a significant amount of capital to back the assets of the commercial banks. So the banking system, in terms of its ratios, etc., is extremely strong and can withstand a significant amount of difficulty. Now, some of the challenges I want you to pay some attention to, because these are some of the things that are going to affect you as scholars.